Welcome back, everyone, to Speak More Fluently.
Great to be here.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into something really fundamental for effective communication in English.
Yeah, we're talking about how to make your key ideas really stand out, how to emphasize what matters.
Exactly, because it's not just what you say, is it? It's so much about how you say it. That's what makes people really listen and understand.
Absolutely. Get this right, and you'll sound clearer, definitely more confident, and, more persuasive, too.
Whether you're giving a presentation, just chatting, or aiming for that feeling of real fluency. And we promise we're going beyond just vocabulary and grammar lists today.
Definitely looking at the practical how-to.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the foundation, really. Word stress and sentence stress.
Right. Word stress first. That's about which syllable gets the emphasis in a word with more than one syllable.
And it can be crucial, can it? Think about the word present.
Mm-hmm.
If I say present, that's a gift.
Right.
But if I say present, I'm giving something like a talk.
Totally different meaning. Just from shifting that little bit of emphasis, it tells the listener what kind of word it is.
And that same idea applies to whole sentences, doesn't it? Sentence stress.
Exactly. In a sentence, we naturally tend to stress the words that carry the most meaning, the content words. Like
nouns, main verbs, adjectives, the core message bits.
Precisely. So if you take a sentence like, I want the blue pen, if you stress blue.
I want the blue pen. You're focused on the color. Maybe there are other pens there.
Exactly. But if you say, I want the blue pen.
Then it's about the desire. Maybe someone doubts you want it.
Or, I want the blue pen.
Then it's about you, not someone else.
You're guiding the listener. You're telling them, this is the important part of what I'm saying right now.
So combining that word stress within the word and the sentence stress across the phrase, that's how we make the core message really clear. It's like painting highlights on the key information.
Yeah, it creates a map for the listener's ear.
Okay, what about the music of speech? Intonation.
Intonation. Yeah, that's the rise and fall of your pitch. The melody, you could say. It adds so much emotional color and grammatical information.
Oh, so?
Well, think about questions. Often, in English, especially yes-no questions, the pitch goes up at the end.
Like, you bought the blue pen, that upward lilt signals I'm asking. I'm not sure.
Exactly. It invites a confirmation or a denial. But if you make a statement, your pitch usually falls.
You bought the blue pen, period. Sounds final, certain.
Right. And intonation gets even more nuanced. You can use it for contrast, for instance. A little rise on the word you want to contrast, followed by a fall.
Give me an example.
Like, I prefer coffee, not tea.
You hear that little peak on coffee?
Yeah, it lifts up slightly, then drops. It really points out the preference against the alternative.
It's a very common way to highlight that kind of distinction, or maybe something unexpected.
Okay, so we've got stress, we've got intonation. Are there other vocal tools we use, maybe more consciously, to emphasize things?
Oh, definitely. Volume is an obvious one. Just slightly increasing your volume on a key word. Like saying, this is important.
Exactly. It draws attention, but you have to be careful, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, too much volume.
You just sound like you're shouting or maybe aggressive. It needs to be strategic, not just loud all the time.
A light touch.
Oh.
Okay, what about playing with pitch on specific words?
Yes. Varying your pitch on stressed words is huge for making your speech lively and engaging. You can go higher or lower.
So not just the overall sentence melody, but on the stressed word itself.
Right. Think about enthusiasm. That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
You might naturally raise the pitch quite high on fantastic.
It conveys the feeling, not just the word.
Okay.
And I feel like sometimes people stretch words out a bit.
Lengthening. Yes, that's another technique.
Uh,
Holding a stressed vowel sound just a fraction longer.
Why do that?
It gives the listener a little extra moment to absorb the importance of that word. Like, you must remember this. Stretching must slightly.
Or, it was really good.
Exactly that. It adds weight.
And pauses. I definitely notice effective speakers using pauses.
Oh, pauses are incredibly powerful. A tiny beat of silence just before, or sometimes just after. A really key word or phrase.
It creates suspense.
It does. It makes the listener lean in, waiting for what's coming. Or it lets the word you just said really sink in. Think about saying, there's one thing you must never forget.
That pause before never really hammers it home.
Absolutely. And pauses can direct attention to the emotional core, too. Like pausing before a negative word can amplify disappointment or seriousness.
Okay. And what about those little words speakers sometimes drop in, like signal
Oh,
words?
yes. Strategic connectors. Words like actually, in fact, most importantly, believe it or not.
They're like signposts, aren't they? Saying, okay, listen up, here comes something important.
Precisely. Actually, that wasn't the point. Or, most importantly, practice. They explicitly flag the emphasis.
It's funny how we do something similar in writing, with punctuation or formatting.
That's a great parallel. Dashes, italics, bold text. They're visual cues for emphasis, mimicking what we do with our voice.
Like, she finally arrived just in time. The dash sets off that important concluding part.
Or using italics. I am so proud of you. It just adds that extra vocal stress visually.
So we've covered a lot of vocal stuff. Stress, intonation, volume, pitch, length, pauses, connectors. But it's not just the voice, is it?
Not at all. Your body language plays a huge role too. Ideally, it should work in harmony with your vocal emphasis.
How does that work?
Well, your gestures, for example. You might naturally use a more open palm gesture when emphasizing a key welcoming point, or maybe a more precise pointed finger for a specific detail you're stressing.
Okay, so the hands reinforce the words.
And facial expressions too. Widening your eyes slightly or raising your eyebrows when you hit a surprising or important word. It adds another layer of meaning.
And posture.
Even posture. Leaning in slightly can signal significance. A subtle nod when stressing an affirmative point can build agreement. It's about congruence, making sure your body is saying the same thing your voice is emphasizing.
It all needs to line up for maximum impact. Got it. Now, are there ways people mess this up? Common mistakes?
Oh, for sure. A really big one is overemphasis. Stressing too many words.
Right. If everything is important.
Then nothing is important.
Right.
Exactly. It just sounds unnatural, maybe a bit frantic or choppy, and the listener doesn't know what to focus on.
Okay. Avoid the scattergun approach. What else?
Monotony. Using the exact same stress pattern or intonation for everything.
Just flat and boring.
And hard to follow. Your ear needs variation to stay engaged and pick out the key information.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Inconsistency can be confusing. Stressing a word one way the first time, then differently later, or shifting emphasis unexpectedly without a clear reason, listeners might lose the thread.
Okay. Be consistent with your main points.
And finally, context is key. The way you emphasize should match the situation. You wouldn't use dramatic pauses and volume shifts talking about the weather like you might in a serious presentation.
Right. It has to feel appropriate.
Exactly. And related to that is something called the information principle in English.
Yeah.
We tend to put new or important information towards the end of a phrase or clause, and that part often gets more stress naturally. So it's not just about stressing content words randomly, but about where the new focus is.
Ah, interesting. So it's about the flow of information, too.
Wow.
Okay, this is all really helpful theory. How can our listeners actually practice this stuff, make it part of their speaking?
Practice is crucial. And there's some really concrete things you can do. First up, the recording drill.
Okay. What
Take a short paragraph, maybe from a book or an article. Record yourself reading it aloud. Then do it again, but this time, consciously try to emphasize different keywords or ideas.
And then compare the recordings.
Exactly. Listen back. Ask yourself, which version really brought out the meaning I intended? Which one sounded most natural and clear? It really trains your ear.
I like that. Active listening to yourself. What about the physical side, the body language?
Mirror practice is great for that. Stand in front of a mirror, say a few sentences where you want to emphasize something, and watch yourself.
See if your gestures and face match the vocal emphasis.
Yes. Do they look natural? Do they help the message? It's about building that mind-body connection for communication. Feels awkward at first, maybe, but it helps.
Builds confidence, too, I bet. Any other exercises?
Definitely. Try the connector swap. Find a short text, maybe something you wrote. Go through and insert some of those emphasis connectors actually, in fact, most importantly, etc., before key ideas.
And then read it aloud.
Read it aloud and feel how those words naturally guide your voice to add emphasis in those spots. It helps internalize their function.
That's clever. Makes you aware of how those little words work. One more.
Partner feedback. If you have a friend, study buddy, language partner, read a sentence or two to them. Then just ask, what word sounded most important there?
Ah, get an outside perspective.
Yeah. Their answer tells you if your intended emphasis is actually landing. If they pick out a different word, you know you need to adjust your stress or intonation.
These are great, really practical tips anyone can try. So if we were to boil it all down, what's the main takeaway message about emphasis?
I think the key thing is that effective emphasis isn't just one technique. It's really a blend. It's about consciously using your voice stress, pitch, volume, pausing, but also using those connector words smartly, maybe even thinking about how punctuation guides us in writing, and crucially, making sure your body language is supporting the same message.
It's a whole package deal, working together and being mindful of these things and then actually practicing them. That's how we get clearer, more engaging, and just, well, more memorable when we speak English.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It really elevates your communication.
So here's a final thought for everyone listening.
Ooh, okay.
Start paying really close attention, maybe starting today, to how native English speakers use emphasis. Listen for it in conversations, in movies, wherever. Notice those subtle shifts in stress, pitch, pauses.
Become an active observer.
And then, don't just observe, consciously experiment with one or two of these techniques in your own speaking today. Even small experiments. Because noticing and then actively applying these things, that's a massive step towards sounding more fluent and truly impactful.
Great advice. Start listening, start trying.